Welcome, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us this morning to discuss aligning U.S. and global immigration programs, which is a topic near and dear to all of our hearts here. So I am Audrey Lustgarten. I'm the managing partner of WR Immigration's global program. So my team and I cover immigration in more than 100 countries around the world, helping our clients navigate the complexities of having a global program and getting people where they need to go when they need to be there. I'm not going to bore you by reading long biographies. I think I will ask each of my speakers to introduce themselves briefly. Tati, can we start with you?
Hello, my name is Tati. I lead immigration and global mobility at OpenAI. I have joined the company 3 years ago, and during this time, the company has grown from under 300 people to over 2,000 people and has expanded from 1 country to soon to be 7 countries by the end of this year. And I worked at rapidly growing companies before, but I must say that hypergrowth is a completely different beast. Like it's a totally different game, and it takes a lot of agility, a lot of extensive planning, a lot of aligning expectations in order to support it in a successful way. And of course, for each company, a successful way would mean a different thing. And specifically for us, given our unique talent pool, it means being able to hire exceptional individuals regardless of their location, and being able to hire them and bring them to the office where we want them to be. Or maybe sometimes even entering that country where this person is and establishing a presence there. So it also means providing white glove service to every single person who goes through immigration or global mobility with us. Because by providing white glove service, you are building trust with the foreign national, and the foreign national is building trust with your company, which is critical for their loyalty and future retention, of course. There are so many things for me to learn as we enter our next phase of growth, and I'm sure that it's going to be exciting. And I'm here today to share the tips that have been instrumental for me so far, and I hope that you will find them useful to support your talent.
Cindy.
Hi, I'm Cynthia Campbell, and I'm with SS&C Technologies. We are a back office financial services technology organization, and I'm supporting the North Americas region. So that includes the United States, Mexico, Canada, Bermuda, and Cayman Islands. And then I have counterparts that are global. So we have presence in all continents. So I think we're in 35 countries and all continents except for Antarctica. And if we could find a product or service that penguins and polar bears could pay for, we would probably be there too. We are a more traditional organization, so a little different than Tati's. We have been around for 38 years, more in a traditional corporate mindset, but we are diverse in what we're doing. And we have about 22,000 employees on a global scale. And in our North America's region, supporting about 550. We are US-based company.
Josune.
My name's Josune Aguirre. I'm a senior associate with WR Immigration based in the LA office. I manage the US program for our clients, and I also work as a strategic partner in implementing and, project management with all of these different systems that we have to get together and create a program that works for everyone.
A different program that works for everyone. Wonderful. Well, thank you all for those introductions. So helpful, I think, to know, a little bit about your programs and the perspective that you're coming from. Today, just a brief overview of the agenda we're going to cover. We are going to discuss why aligning your U.S. and global immigration program matters. It really drives success. We're going to go over the building blocks for U.S. and global program alignment. We're going to have an interactive audience scenario and then a bit of Q&A, because we think that, engaging in these sessions can sometimes deliver the most value. So for our audience survey, we would love to hear from you. We've got the QR code up on the screen. We're going to leave it there for just a minute so you have a chance to scan it. This is a little kind of mini version of a longer global benchmarking survey that we have out there right now. WR started an immigration benchmarking collective where we are bringing together corporate in-house folks to gather data and benchmark against one another. We have another survey that's out there that's a lot longer than this, but wanted to just do a little mini one since we have you here with us today. So we would love to get as many of you to complete this as possible. And then we're going to select one submission to talk about live at the end of our session today. Great. Well, just to set the tone a little bit here for our discussion of, U.S. and global program alignment, why is this such a thing? And why is really, I've been in the industry for going on 18 years now. Why is interest in global growing, honestly, every year? Like every year that I've done this has gotten busier and busier, with the exception of the COVID years, which were just a challenge. More and more challenging each day. You look at other countries around the world as compared to the US, and you really see that a lot of them are going in the opposite direction as us and really embracing high-skilled foreign national populations. In the UK, the high-skilled foreign national workforce has been growing exponentially. Similarly, in Canada, each year a little bit more, with the exception of the, 2020 COVID years, more and more high-skilled professionals are going to Canada. You've got the same sort of trend going on in other locations, Germany, Singapore, Ireland. It's not to say there's never pushback. There have been recent changes in Canada based on the high unemployment rate and some, political pressure to scale back a little bit on immigration. But it's just not to the extent that we have, I think, here in the US, where you're facing just a lot of stagnation. Pathways for getting the talent that you need into the US seem to be getting worse rather than better. Comprehensive immigration reform is something that we've all been dreaming of for a very long time, but just doesn't seem to be happening. And in the interim, you all are having to run your programs, based on really limited options to get the talent that you need where you need it in the US. So this is a little excerpt from a survey that we ran earlier in the year, and it really shows that companies are supportive of relocating employees overseas when there is not a pathway in the US. They're looking for those alternatives. Business is global, and if you need particular talent, a lot of companies are willing to be flexible about where that talent is based. 68% in our survey were supportive of relocating folks. Turning to really, looking at coordinating relocations and aligning your programs, it's great. Like, I think probably everyone here is like, yes, alignment. No one wants to be, misaligned. That doesn't sound positive, right? But it's not to say that there are not challenges in trying to find that alignment. From the survey that we ran, some common themes kept coming up. So we kind of grouped those here today and are going to have our panelists talk a little bit more about them. So one really big pain point was just policy consistency. Looking at what the company is doing in the US versus other countries. Are the policies consistent? Is there, what someone is getting in the UK is just very different from the US, and that can lead to a lot of challenges. So Cindy, I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about some of those challenges that you have faced in terms of alignment and inconsistency.
Sure. So what we found is, assuming the Canada operations, we didn't have a lot of infrastructure in place there. And anytime you've got immigration happening and you don't have structure, you're at high risk because you're operating in a space where governments have a lot of scrutiny. So, and then in the second arena, we would bring a lot of tech talent from our India operations, and they would be going to US, UK, Australia, Canada, and it would look so different for every assignment. But these folks are coming from the same home base. So they're comparing notes and they're talking to each other about their experience and who's getting what. And were your dependents included? Were yours? Mine weren't. And it was because we were decentralized. And so when we pulled all of those together, we had to be mindful, though, that there are some customary business practices, right? So you want to stay cutting edge and you want to be there competing with other employers that are mobilizing their workforces on a global scale. So you don't want to be the lowest person on the totem pole with what you're offering. But if you don't have those guardrails up with your policies and programs, you're going to have a budget overrun because it takes a hot minute to get your immigration program budget askew. And so you've got to be really mindful of that. And I think that's about all I had to share about that.
Thank you. Another really common pain point that kept coming up again and again for the folks that completed the survey was communication and stakeholder education. It seems that word travels lightning fast when it's foreign nationals comparing notes about, who got what and what wasn't the same and why was that happening. So you don't need any help spreading the word on that. But on the other side of it, really communicating the message that you want to get out there and educating your stakeholders is a challenge, I think, for a lot of folks. And I'm wondering, Tati, if you can talk a little bit about that at OpenAI.
Yes, certainly. So as you know, things are moving at the speed of light at our organization. And what I learned is that it's especially essential to communicate and align your stakeholders and educate them when you are expanding globally. You and I and all of us who are managing the immigration programs, we must be the first person to know where the company is going next, because then we can go and do our homework and learn everything about the unique requirements that a certain country has, so we can then go and support foreign nationals in that country. And I can give you an example. Let's say the company is going to a country X, and there is no plan to open a physical office there, but you know that a physical office is a hard requirement for you to be able to support immigration in that region. So it's your job to go and educate the stakeholders and talk to the recruiting partner, for example, and say, hey, if you want to support foreign nationals in that location, we must have an office there. And they might tell you that they are not planning on sourcing talent from the other countries, right? They don't want to source talent from overseas, and the plan is to source talent internally in that country. And then you can bring the perspective that, yes, but think that some of this exceptional talent might be visa holders, right? And for our purposes, for immigration, in order for us to be able to hire them, we must comply with all the requirements. And then next time when you open the office in a different country, the recruiting partner will have this in mind and will think about it proactively. And I'm sure that your real estate person will appreciate an early heads up as well, because it's just getting harder and harder to secure an office space. And in some locations, it might take 6 months, it might take longer, especially if you need to comply with certain physical security requirements.
Yeah, I think that's a great example, and an example of where sometimes you're just going to have inconsistency between different locations because some locations are fine with a virtual setup and some require that physical office. But at least by being proactive about it, you're identifying that and you're documenting the reason that it's different, and you're guiding your team through that and setting their expectations, I think.
Yeah, certainly. And there are so many unique requirements that each country has, and physical office is just one example.
Yeah. It's one of many things that you faced. Great. Well, then another common and probably not surprising pain point that people mentioned was systems and vendor management. And I actually have to share, we had a breakfast the other day and we were asking people how many systems they used. And I'll let Josune share the answer to that, but it was eye-opening for sure. So Josune, can you talk a little bit about, some of the challenges and successes of building those programs, to work together with clients and really help them align their programs?
Yeah, definitely. So yesterday in our benchmarking breakfast, we heard someone say, quite confidently, I probably have the most programs that I have to do, and that is 7. I open up 7 every morning. And we ended up having somebody turn around and say, excuse me, actually, I have 8. I open 8 every morning. And so there were some who were really grateful. If you're in here, I'm very sorry. I don't mean to disclose.
Picking on people.
Yeah, I know.
Sorry.
I know. And, we did hear that they are working to try to, coordinate efforts and having less programs. But that meant having 8 different sources of data. So they don't have a single source of truth. And that becomes complicated, right? And so when you're looking at your vendors, you're probably not looking, especially your immigration counsel, as your partner as a, project management and technology implementation. But we definitely are. we do implement our systems with your system so that the data is communicating with each other. And that can streamline so much, right? Because when you're growing, and we do have rapid growth, we are able to forecast appropriately. We can plan and become more proactive instead of reactive with a lot of situations, such as budget forecasting, or if we understand that, we're going to grow double in the next coming year, we know that we need to allocate so much for each country, right? And so looking at this data and having US and global in one platform, you are able to then go to your clients, or, the clients are able to come to us and make those requests as far as what reports they need to be able to forecast with their stakeholders and educate them on what they need for their program.
It seems like it's just more, you have visibility into where there is and isn't alignment, and a lot of, having that data is crucial to being able to drive change, I think.
Yeah. And for one example, we did an implementation for a recruiting efforts, right? And so instead of having, 10 recruiters or one, login to our system to do candidate assessments, we then shifted to implementing their recruiting system into our program so that they can, in their program, submit a candidate assessment, especially when there's now 100 recruiters. There are maybe even more now, and that will directly communicate with their program and their data. And so we all have a clear line of communication of where we think this candidate, may work. And then we are also being proactive in understanding that we may need to park them somewhere to make it viable for them to then go to the, desired country.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And even though the requirements are not the same in every country, you have a simple way that is the same for the recruiters, regardless of which country they're in, to be submitting candidate assessments, and then you can treat them equitably.
And the great thing about working with you is that, we can communicate together instead of having to go through a third, individual or the client. We can coordinate efforts to make sure our recruiting efforts are done correctly, and that can meet most of our requirements.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Thanks, Josune. Anyone else want to chime in? Did you want to?
I just wanted to say that knowing what your data is also a direct contribution to how you need to set up your policies and identifying your stakeholders too. So if you don't have that true single source of data, then that feeds down to building your program.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And that's a nice segue into our next slide here. So again, these are results from our survey of different in-house folks and kind of what they're facing in their quest to align their U.S. and global immigration programs. And a really significant proportion of the respondents indicated that they were using different vendors for U.S. versus global immigration. And I think this is honestly another really big challenge, because if you've got different vendors, different systems, data in multiple places, then it's going to make it a bit harder to align the global and the US program and to make things consistent. And back to the point of multiple systems, this gives some more data around what we were informally talking about at our breakfast the other day. There are a couple of lucky folks that have just one platform, but there's an awful lot. 25% of respondents having 4 platforms and 19% having 5 or more platforms. That's a lot to keep track of every day, and which person is where. And then sometimes there's duplicative entries, and which one is correct. It can really turn into a bit of a nightmare, I think.
And then who becomes responsible for that data, right?
Yeah.
Who takes ownership for that?
Absolutely.
And all the compliance issues, because how can you keep track of where you're storing your personal data and where all the documents are?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if you don't have a single source of truth, or at least, if you've got multiple programs, integrating, to your point. Sometimes you are stuck with multiple programs, but at least selecting ones that can possibly feed data or integrate can simplify things and help you to align. So I think we have thoroughly gone over all the problems and challenges that are out there. A little bit of a downer start to the panel, all the problems and things that you all face. Shifting now to taking kind of a positive approach and looking at, as you are seeking to align your US and global program, what are kind of the building blocks that you need to think about and that you need to go through to get you where you want to go? It's, I think, tempting to jump into one of these or the other. Employee experience is incredibly important, but if you start with that, it might be kind of a cart before the horse situation. So I'd love to get your thoughts on these building blocks. And really, I think the idea is that you start with looking at your company's global hiring and growth strategy. That's kind of your starting point. Like, where are you trying to go? What are the goals? Because each company is going to be a bit different. So wondering, Tati or Cindy, do you want to speak to that?
We learned our mistakes and we now have a roadmap. And this roadmap covers a couple of years, and it's kind of a wish list. That's how we treat it, a wish list of countries and locations where we want to grow and expand. And it might never happen, right? We might change the plans and we might never even enter those countries. But it allows all the stakeholders and people who are involved in those expansions do their homework and understand what potentially is ahead of them, right? It is instrumental when you're planning your talent, if you need to hire more people, if you need to leverage additional resources. For example, you can talk to your immigration vendor and tell them, hey, this is the plan for next year. We are planning on doubling again, and we are planning on entering a new country every single quarter, or whatever it is, right? But asking them to also think if they need to add additional resources to your account and how else you might need to restructure your own space.
That's great. Definitely, knowing where you're going helps you to anticipate the needs and plan, even if you're going there very quickly.
Yeah. Reduces the number of surprises.
Yes.
Surprises are never fun.
Not immigration surprises.
Not immigration surprises. So knowing that hiring and growth strategy really requires that immigration partner to have that close-knit relationship, either with your BU leaders, if they're the ones that are driving it, or if you've got it across your business unit, so you've got individual managers that are driving it, then it's getting into that close relationship with your talent acquisition or your recruitment partners and making sure that you're making those strong relationships internally so that, they can give you those heads up and you can anticipate, because there's no good immigration surprise that ever happens.
Absolutely. No, we prefer to avoid. Please, yes.
I wanted to add something positive to it. So
thank you.
So it also allows you to build your immigration program in a more kind of holistic manner. And as you know that you will be adding more countries, it means that you will be enabling your talent, right? Because now you can use all those different countries to move your new hires. And if a new hire is not qualified for a visa in one location, you can think, I know that we are entering to that country a couple of quarters from now. So if we still need to hire that person that time, we can do it utilizing that immigration program in that country.
And I mean, I think sometimes it can even, immigration can do the reverse and drive business strategy. What is and isn't possible can potentially shift where the company might be focusing. Probably not ideal, probably not what the business would like, but the reality of the world we live in, I think. What about okay, so you understand now your company's global hiring and growth strategy. What about really, developing that global immigration policy and mapping out your processes? Do you have thoughts on that?
So it's document, because the best kept secrets are always in writing. So it is best to make sure that you are identifying that common practice. And you're going to have those nuances, like I mentioned earlier, because there's going to be some limitations or some regional things that are, expected or anticipated based on, what's normative in that jurisdiction. And again, I cover a North America's region, so I've got an EMEA's and I've got an APAC person, and we one of our success stories is that we didn't used to report in a centralized fashion at my company, and so they would report into a regional HR for their jurisdiction, and so we were siloed. And then there was this brilliant idea that we should make it be a COE that's globally based. And then all of a sudden, these synergies start coming together and we're finding these nuances. Ooh, I like how you do that, or I didn't realize we were doing that. No, we're at corporate headquarters. We don't do that in North America. Oh, well, we do it here at APAC. And so making those types of relationships, if you have counterparts that are covering other jurisdictions, that if you are not in the same reporting relationship, tip 101, get in the same reporting relationship so you have that opportunity to collaborate. And if you can't make that change happen, then make the collaboration on your own on the sidebar with your counterparts in those jurisdictions.
Yeah, this is super critical. I second that. And not only with your immigration program managers located overseas, but also with all the cross-functional partners, because you sometimes need to partner with other teams to be able to successfully move your talent. Thinking about policies, I wanted to kind of bring this perspective that first you need to identify what is important and absolutely non-negotiable for your own company. And it will be very different for every single company, right? For some companies, it might be, we are not compromising on providing this white glove service or like in-person support. And whatever we do, no matter where we go, we want to make sure that this is provided to every single person. For other companies, it might be volume, right? We want to make sure that we are optimizing for volume. And even though we are not that much in person with the other party, with the foreign national, we know that we are doing it quickly. We know that we are doing it in an efficient way. And that's what important for us. We are keeping our teams lean, and this is our strategy. So really understanding the business needs and what is important for your leadership team, and then translating it to your policies and your process mapping.
To add to that, when we're meeting with our clients and also just planning and doing forecasting, we're also looking at the changes in policy so that we're all aligned as well. So when we're looking at those candidate assessments, we're looking at start dates, we're looking to make sure we're aligned with how we proceed and how we can support the client as well. And so when we're, providing a potential candidate to be parked, we're also understanding that the client is amenable to that, right? That is a possibility. Or if we're, also looking to potentially have a quicker start date, that is also communicated to stakeholders to say, hey, we're going to try this O1 in 2 weeks, but they also need to get a visa. And there may be some delays due to administrative processing, but we'll do everything we can to make it work. And as long as stakeholders are aware of that, we're aligned with policy and being able to be flexible when it comes to that.
All right. So the hiring and growth strategy, you've developed your policy, you've mapped your processes. Now you have some internal stakeholder management potentially. You've got to communicate the policies, you've got to educate folks. I would imagine that involves some challenges, but also both of you, I think, have had good success with your programs. Would you like to say a little bit about stakeholder management?
Yes, definitely. So I want to give you an example about how I, for example, communicate with managers. So there are certain cases when the foreign national is having not an easy immigration process, and I'm sure that you all have had at least one client like this, and the person themselves can be in a lot of stress. And you are in a lot of stress too, because it's taking longer. They might be receiving RFEs. There might be some additional constraints. Just bringing them out of that country is so complex and just requires so much strategy and logistics that, you want to make sure that you thought about every single possible strategy and possible scenario. So the key here is to go to that manager and explain them what's happening so they understand, so they are on the same page with you, and so they can support that foreign national from their side and tell them, hey, I know that it's taking longer, but that's okay. We are here for you and we will wait for you here. We are not going to withdraw the offer letter. You are all safe. Don't worry about it. We've got you. And simple words like this, they go a long way.
Absolutely, especially in a time of high stress. Indeed, do you have thoughts on stakeholder management with the alignment?
Yeah, so just what Tati said is that you've got to try and take as much stress off of that foreign national worker because they're not productive when they're stressed. So that is key. what we find helpful is that there's a partnership that we have with our HR business partners, and they tend to take on more of that concierge role for us when they're in the jurisdiction where the employee's going. So all those challenging situations of how do I get my tax ID and what documentation do I need and things along those lines. And we try to level set with our managers that, raise their hands and say, hey, I need to have this talent in this location. At the very onset, we are checking in with our immigration provider to say, what's the lead time? And once you've been able to level set those expectations on immigration, because it never goes faster, it always goes slower. So we always build in that cushion, because in their minds, it's like, you just fill out some paperwork and then they're here. I mean, they'll catch their flight in 2 weeks. And that's where you really need to make that level set. And with the economy and a lot of the changes that Audrey had mentioned earlier that are happening, a lot of those high growth areas for bringing in foreign talent are starting to shrink and shrivel. And so it's not as easy as it used to be. And as an example, Canada used to be our go-to. Boom, we'll drop them in Canada if we can't get them here in the US. And that's not as easy as it used to be a year ago. So it is a changing landscape.
Or even a few weeks ago.
Yeah, or a few weeks.
Evolving process. And I'd imagine, I don't know, does, communicating your policies to the stakeholders in advance of those crisis situations, does that also play a role in kind of managing and getting ahead of things? Do you find that helps at all? Or is it, what do we always say, TLDR? The stakeholders are not reading the policy?
Right. So, and that's where your provider comes in and lets you know, hey, this is the heartburn. This is the traffic that we're seeing with other clients that are going to this jurisdiction or with this visa filing type. So you've got to lean in hard on your immigration provider to give you the landscape of what's going on in real time, because you can go and you can see things in the news and things along those lines, but you need the boots on the ground that are doing the work on the immigration to let you know what those pitfalls are and what those hurdles are that you're going to have to get through. So step one, get that from your provider.
Yes, and step 2 would be to educate your closest collaborators, recruiting partners, right, in this sense, and host the training and ask the recruiting team to join the training and spend 1 hour of your day and let them know about potential challenges. And also, policies can go both ways. So sometimes regulations, they actually are positive, and sometimes you can tell them, hey, we are seeing some really positive movements in the country, let's say United Kingdom, and we are able to bring the talent there within 1 week or like within 2 weeks only. So you can plan accordingly. And if you have an urgent hire who requires sponsorship, and we might not be able to bring them to the United States within this timeline, but we will most definitely be able to bring them to the United Kingdom. And this way they can then think and bring this up to hiring managers and share this idea with them. Of course, it might not be always possible, but the more you talk about it, the more it becomes a reality.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. What about technology, data, vendors? When you are aligning your global program, are these things that are helping, hindering? Thoughts around that?
What we've been able to do as an HR immigration team is become an influencer to our BU heads with a monthly report that we generate. So we've got leaders that are overseeing 5,000 headcount. And so they're not seeing things on the granular level, but when they're looking at their hiring and their foreign national talent ends up tripling what the cost of hire is, and they're like, where are these hiring dollars going? Well, they're getting a monthly report out of the HR immigration team that's showing them the headcount that's sponsored and the headcount that's non-sponsored. So They also need to know their non-sponsored headcount, because sometimes the non-sponsored end up jumping into the sponsored pond because of things that happen where they max out, or if they're a dependent, that spouse loses their status, so then they need to shift over. And so we try to keep them informed of knowing how many headcount they have. And then in addition to that, with the information that we get from our amazing vendor, we are able to also provide them year-to-date costs so they can see how they're ticking up each month in their business unit with that immigration expense. And so having that data and feeding it to them regularly. And then we also do quarterly touch base with our key partners. So like Tatiana was saying, keeping that talent acquisition or that recruiting team in the know of what the major issues are that are in immigration. I mean, it's a 15-minute time slot on a quarterly basis where we just keep our face and voices in front of them with information that helps them be informed of what to expect. And we do that with our I-9 team, because there's a lot of changes in the U.S. with I-9s. And then we also do it with our HR business partners, like what to expect for the upcoming H-1B cap season. That's going to be our quarterly talk when we get back next month. So,
yeah, and I think that that example, Cindy, of the the forecasting and the budget and all of that ties into with your example, Tati. Like the hiring manager is maybe going to be super happy about 48-hour processing time in the UK, but they might be surprised when they get the invoice if you're not having a system that shows you the cost for the various different options that you're choosing from. Be a few extra zeros on the government fees invoice. Josune, did you have any thoughts on the technology?
Yeah, it's all about just understanding that you don't want to be the bottleneck, right? So you have to learn to implement. You have to learn to, leverage that data in ways that can make the process a bit better, and, not to jump ahead, but to, improve the employee experience as well. And so it's just leveraging all of that. And although implementation might be a little bit more difficult than just saying, hey, I'm going to leverage this data, or I'm going to align the program, the work is worth it. It's definitely worth it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then that's a nice segue into the employee experience. When you are aligning your U.S. and your global programs, how are you thinking about the employee experience? Do you have thoughts on that, Tati?
This is my favorite topic. I'm all about employee experience, so I will try to keep it short, but I can talk about it probably forever. So employee experience is critical because there is so many things you can do through providing good employee experience. As I mentioned earlier, one of the things which is critical is to build trust with the foreign national. And you're building trust with this person. The person is building trust with you. By extension, they're building trust with the entire organization. And it creates tremendous loyalty, and it does affect their retention in the future. Also, providing good employee experience and by have this trust established allows your foreign nationals to feel calm and to feel supported. They know that you've got their back no matter what, so they can go and concentrate on all that exceptional job. And they don't have to think and worry about the immigration. They know that you're tracking their validity time. They know that you will give them a heads up when it's time to renew their visa. If they're traveling somewhere for the conference or just for the business trip, they know that you will think about them. They know that you will see their name in the roster and flag it to them to start their visa process so they can safely travel to their conference. They know that you will try to organize the entire process in the most streamlined manner so that they are least disturbed and so that they don't have to spend a lot of time on filling out those forms and completing yada, yada, yada. They can spend 5 minutes on this and arrive to the destination. Well, of course, they need to go to biometrics and get the visa stamp and all these things. But, you minimize where you can. And in our case, it's quite significant because we want people to concentrate on research. We want people to concentrate on engineering and not concentrate on paperwork.
Mm-hmm. And do you think that it's helpful for the employee experience side of things that you have your data all in one place, and that, if they're providing data for one country and then traveling somewhere else, then you're able to access that?
Absolutely. It's kind of circling back to having a simplified platform. If you have all your foreign national data in one platform and you have all kind of US, global, and business visas all in one platform, it just simplifies the process for them so much because the platform already knows the information. all the person needs to do is to review that all this information is still accurate, and then boom, they're good to go. And this simplification really goes a long way because no one likes filling out the forms.
Especially 3 times or
Especially
something.
3 times.
Cindy, did you want to add anything on that?
I didn't.
Okay, great. No, that's fine. We need to move along anyway. Mindful of time here. We want to make sure that we're getting to questions as well. I think the last point would just be to touch briefly on KPIs and, how does that play into the global program alignment? Are you able to apply similar KPIs across different jurisdictions? Is having a single source of truth with your data or your vendor, is that helpful in looking at your KPIs at all?
Absolutely. So when I took over the program at SS&C, I increased my caseload by 75%, and I couldn't have done it if I didn't have the strong relationship with my external vendor, because that math doesn't ever work. And so it really is key to have that partnership.
Yes, absolutely. And what I also found useful is to have the SLAs that are very straightforward, confirm these SLAs with your vendor, and then as you work through every single case and kind of understand what it takes, being able to then reduce the time that takes for every single case, find automation options, find how you can simplify the process. For your H-1Bs, it might be batch LCAs filing, it might be something else. It might be having really streamlined templates and having really detailed job descriptions that your vendor can have and review and utilize, and really thinking proactively about, okay, what we can simplify, what time gains we can find here and there, and how we can make sure that our SLAs are going down instead of going up. And keeping it consistent too, because as you know, if you're able to get your H-1B change of employer within 2 weeks or 3 weeks, people get into this habit and they expect it from you, right? So then keeping it consistent, and of course aligning globally. So having your SLAs very in a clear manner for every single country where you operate, for every single visa case that you support.
Great. Then I think we're gonna select one of our audience things.
I'm gonna read it off.
Yeah,
Yeah.
go for it.
So thank you all for submitting. We're going to select one anonymous response from the audience here. So I'll just read off what the responses to each of these bullet points are here, and then the panel will go ahead and discuss. So the number of U.S. foreign national employees from this program is 600. They use 3 global immigration vendors. Their top countries for global immigration matters are Canada, the UK, Ireland, and Singapore. In 2023, they had about 450 global immigration matters, and they have 2 team members that manage their global immigration matters. So we broke that down into a ratio of about 225 annual matters to 1 team member each. The 3 biggest pain points that they listed with their global program alignment were lack of a single source of truth for data, that's on brand there, budgeting, and lack of on-site support. And then the solutions to better align their global immigration programs that they said that they implemented is that they added a new team member in EMEA, and they're planning to consolidate under 1 vendor.
Great. Thanks, Finn. Yeah, that's a lot of foreign nationals for 2 team members to be managing, particularly not just in the US, but then globally. We had a survey on program management, and I think the average was somewhere around 150 foreign nationals to 1 team member. So you're busy. My condolences. So I think it would be great, Cindy and Tati, to get your thoughts around this, and Josune, if you have any as well. Their biggest pain points are, that lack of a single source of truth, their budgeting, and the lack of on-site support. Obviously, they're dealing with a lot of foreign nationals for their program size. What advice, I guess, would you give as they're trying to better align their global immigration practices?
Sure. So your single source of truth, you need that for compliance. Oh my. Managing your renewals, you absolutely need to be on top of that. Your foreign nationals are thinking a year ahead of time. Most of your jurisdictions won't let you file any sooner than 6 months, but they're already there. Like, in 2026, I am going to need XYZ. And they are advocating for themselves. So kudos to them, because that's helpful for you if you don't have a single source of truth. No one likes to have surprises in immigration. Like we said, those are not fun. Having that single source of data for your retention strategies too. So, retaining your talent, sometimes you have to come up with creative alternatives, when your F1 students are maxing out. And they are either going to have to go to school for their 4th master's degree in order to stay, or they're not interested in doing that anymore, or they've exhausted your employee education benefits. So it's cost prohibitive. And then you've got your strangle with the Canada border kind of tightening up on their side. So if you don't know who your population is, then you can't begin to consider any of those strategies. And so that's your forward thinking. You're trying to run your business day to day, and then you need to also be able to strategize too.
I would take a step back and I would kind of pause before adding an additional team member, especially because they have a problem of not having a single source of truth. Because if you're having currently these issues, adding an additional person might actually worsen those issues, because you are basically adding one additional program, one additional person who is going to be located far away, and aligning with that person is going to be really hard if you don't have a single source of truth. So I would take a step back and first think, okay, so we have quite a bit of foreign nationals to support, what we can automate, how we can optimize the process, how we can make it from the technological perspective, how we can support this program, right? And then solve for consolidation first, solve for having this one source of truth, and only after reevaluate, okay, so now when we have done all this, do we even need to add this additional person? Maybe it's no longer needed. Because if you support 220 foreign nationals, you don't support them all at once. It's kind of, you support the case, but then this case goes like it's done, right? So it doesn't require that much support from your side. And then you receive your new cases, right? If you have about 200 cases, it means that you open just a couple of cases a week. And per person, it's very doable. And you can allocate your time and lean on your vendor and find the automation options to support the rest.
I love the different perspective on it and the automation. Not surprising given where you work. Cynthia, if you want to carry on.
So on the budgeting aspect, that was a pain point. So again, if you have that single source of truth, and then I mentioned that we were doing those year-to-date reports to our BU heads, showing them their head count for sponsored and non-sponsored. So that again gets that budgeting on the radar for that group.
Great. Does anyone want to go live with the question? We'll give you preference if you're brave. Here in the front row.
So ideally, you would just have one platform that you're putting everything into, would be like best case scenario. But if you can't, Excel is pretty powerful. It can do a lot for you, but my ability to take on 75% more headcount in a foreign national capacity was because of the platform that I get from my vendor. So otherwise I couldn't have. My Excel spreadsheet skills and gathering that from all the different jurisdictions would have taken forever.
I think that even if you don't have a vendor who is able to kind of consolidate everything for you, utilize the systems that are available to you. Excel is a fantastic example. You can ask ChatGPT. No, but I'm serious. You can ask, this is what I'm trying to do, and this is the data that I'm trying to consolidate. This is the system that I currently have available to me. Please give me a step-by-step guidance on how to do it. It will supply you with all the necessary formulas. It will let you know where and how to input these formulas and how to organize it all in one document.
I would just also add, don't be afraid to lean on your vendor. It is sometimes surprising, having people come to us and thinking they don't have the tools. So don't be afraid to be proactive and to advocate for yourself with your current vendor and to say, I need this. Can you deliver it? I can speak to what we do at WR is, even if we are not necessarily processing all of the cases in all the different jurisdictions. Like, we're willing to track data. We're willing to upload data and track it for the clients. I'm doing an onboarding now where we're doing that. Like, there are some countries that are carved out for particular reasons, but we're tracking all the data. So they've got the best of both worlds, the single source of truth, but without necessarily having to change things that they have set up for a particular reason.
I also suggest like joining some benchmarking, communities, because they, just because this is an example now, we heard yesterday it was like 1 to 1,000, right? So they are getting creative in their processes. And so, talking to other people and getting some insight like that, I think is really helpful to a lot of different programs.
Yes, a plug for the Immigration Benchmarking Collective on LinkedIn. Does anyone else have a very quick question? We're almost at time.
That's a great question. So you need to be creative there. And when I mentioned earlier, you need to learn in advance kind of all the requirements of the jurisdiction and do your homework even before you have the first foreign national to support. This way you can proactively gather all the documents that are required, at least from the company side, and prepare for the first case. So just doing homework and trying to prepare as much as you can. And then when you have that first foreign national, go full on having all this information ready.
Yeah, and again, don't be afraid to lean on your vendor. We love, and I think even our competitors love, clients that are wanting to plan ahead for a good experience. So reach out and ask, even before you've got that first case, have that discussion. Hey, we're thinking about going here. What can you tell us about it? How can we be prepared? It's a good thing. So mindful of time, we're going to wrap here, but thank you all so much. If anyone has questions, we can hang around for a few minutes here. We know we didn't give you too much time for live questions, so don't hesitate to come up and ask us. Thank you.